Zero waste farming can be the difference between making money as a farmer and not making it. Zero waste farming is learning how to use everything that you produce on the farm in different ways, from preserving and drying it to gifting and donating it to food banks or maybe even your local school. Annamarie Forsbauer is my sister. She and her husband own Klippers Organic Acres. They also are co-owners of Row 14, their award-winning restaurant that uses the farm produce they grow. They also have the Untangled Cidery and a marketplace where they sell their food and their preserves in their on-farm market right directly to the customer. And she really exemplifies zero waste farming. And I'm really excited to share this conversation with you about how practicing zero waste farming has transformed their farm over the last 20 years, because they didn't start off with all they have today. They started off small. Thank you so much for joining us for the Soil Summit. Enjoy this conversation with Annamarie on zero waste farming. Good to see you, sister.
Good to see you. I'm excited to be here today with you.
Thank you. Well, it's really cool that we get to hop into a conversation about zero waste farming, given the way we were raised. We were raised on an organic farm. There's some biodynamic practices sprinkled throughout with some composting and some preps off and on. And one of the, I think, biggest takeaways from the way we were raised is the way mom used food and the way she made everything stretch, and how we literally almost had no food waste on the farm from what we grew, and how you have really brought that into your farming model as you launched Klippers Organic Acres with your orchard, and then moved into the Row 14 with your restaurant, and then with using your maybe some people call throwaway apples from Untangled Cidery, and then moving into your marketplace, offering your fresh food and preserves in a way that people can get them right from your farm. So I'm really curious about what that journey's been like for you, and what zero waste farming is, and how we can glean from that and inspire others to harness that model and use it.
Yeah. So I think that it was one of those things that when we bought our farm originally, it was one of those things that for me, it was a huge thing, was food waste and how much food is wasted on farms. And moving up to the Okanagan, the Similkameen Valley, so South Okanagan, how much farm waste there was, and the piles of apples in the fields, piles of squash, the piles of the rows and rows of apples with apples laying on the ground, just going to, going back into the earth for sure. But at the same time, that was and then the forefront being I never saw this as a child. There is so much food waste at the farm level, and that wasn't how we wanted to farm. We wanted to be able to farm and use the food that we grew that was full of nutrients to feed people. And so it was one of those things that, it's very much started with, having peaches left over from market and being oh my gosh, these peaches are so good. They're so delicious. I can't fathom myself to eat them all because I physically couldn't do it, and stuff them down my children's faces. It wasn't feasible. We could not eat as much food as we were bringing home from market. And so it was how do I preserve this? How do I make it so that we can enjoy it throughout the winter? Because I know winter's going to come and it's going to be really, really long. And if I can preserve it now, I'm going to save money down the road and be able to know what my family's eating throughout the winter. And so, right off the bat, our first season, it was we were going out buying lots of canning jars and canning and, coming up and developing recipes for different things, and, bringing them into the health, getting them tested, and then packaging them and bringing them to market. And it was something that we started on a really, really small scale of first and foremost, make sure we have enough food to feed our family. And then what food we have extra, what did we have to use to develop a recipe or preserve so that we could sell it and put more money in our pockets. And so, which essentially allows you to expand, allows you to do more things on your farm. If you can sell everything that you have or save money on your food budget for the winter with using the stuff that you preserve.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of the times I think we're moving away from food having to be perfect that we sell off the farm, right? Like, and I think this model can be used from a farmer who is shipping just the number ones into the marketplace, and then using their number twos or their other stuff to make other stuff to preserve it. And then it can also be used by the person who's already working like B2C, like right from the farm to their customer that that has stuff left over.
Yeah. So, we also started drying stuff, right? So the drying thing is like, for us, there's like zero inputs in the perspective of like stuff that we had to bring in to do the processing kind of thing. So I didn't have to go buy jars or like big, heavy expenses behind it. But at the same time, the shelf life on it and the shelf stability of stuff like that, where, having the water test done on the product and making sure they're shelf stable, those are important things, but at the same time, super simple to be able to do. The other thing is being able to do these things. And, you ask any of my siblings and stuff like that throughout the years, and they're like, oh, so, what were some of your favorite Christmas gifts or birthday gifts throughout the season? And, it was always like, oh yeah, I remember Annamarie dropped off like these big, huge bags of like apple chips and apple juice and like, being able to share things and gift them to people. Right. And so, and knowing that they were going to be consumed and knowing that they were not going to be wasted. So sometimes it's not about like the money that you're going to make off of it, but at the same time, the money that you make off of it does help for sure. But the feel good part about things. And so I think
sorry, go ahead.
I don't know. I just feel good about being able to feed people. Like people are like, oh, these, we're at market and people are like, oh, these don't look very good. Like, what are you going to do with them? And I'm like, well, we can sell them a second if somebody wants them, or if they're like, oh, well, nobody wanted them, so I'll just put them in the compost bin. I'm like, well, no, they're not compost. We'll take them back to the farm and we'll process them. And, people are like, so literally you just take stuff that people don't want and you bring it back and you process it, and then people can't get enough of it. Right. So like our dried peaches are like so popular that, at this time of year, we're almost sold out. And I'm like, okay, well, how do I have more number two peaches that I can process, or more peaches that people don't want that I can process, kind of thing. So like our preserve line has been like so successful that we're actually growing food to process in our preserve line now. So whether it be like our apple chips or our cider or the tomatoes. So when we're allocating what we're going to grow, we're allocating a certain amount that is going to go to processing. First and foremost, we'll try to sell it fresh. But at the same time, we know that we're growing more than we're going to be able to sell fresh. And we know that it's a certain percentage that's going to go back into the jars to keep people fed, because it's, a jar of pickles that they get the market that's going to, sit in their cupboard for a long time. And it's a shelf stable product. So, and it's gets to the point where people come back and they're buying like cases of things and they're like, oh my gosh, these pickles are so good. What am I supposed to eat? You're out of pickles. And I'm like, well, how about try some like squash or some carrots or something? And they're like, no, but I live on these pickles. And I'm like, that's not really healthy. So educating our consumer what's really healthy and what's not. So encouraging them to eat fresh things as well.
That's awesome. I love how you just touched on the gift economy, because, for a smaller farm or a startup that they're just starting to move into preserving and finishing and finding alternative ways to move their food is preparing food for yourself and then using the extra as gifts for friends, family, teachers, donating them to gift baskets to local charities. And not only does that help your local community, but it also helps get your farm
Mhm.
seen and raises a profile of what you're doing.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
it's like, it is one of those things that like often, like we do support lots of different food banks and lots of food charities and stuff like that as well. And so
Mhm.
it's about, for us, it's about, making sure that that food is getting consumed and it is being used. And so sometimes people are like, oh, well, don't you want to take these tomatoes home for making your salsa? And I'm like our volunteers at market. And I'm like, you know what? If I don't have to process tomatoes this week, I'll be very happy because I have a lot of other things that I have to do as well. And so the processing sometimes is extra work. And sometimes if I can just give it away to a food bank or a soup kitchen or to the women's shelter, or to, like anywhere. And it's like, sometimes I'm calling up and I'm like, hey, you know what? We have like, 10 cases of lettuce that I know that I could take and I could feed to my chickens. But at the same time, there's lots of other things. And we have pasture rotation and stuff like that for the chickens. So the chickens are already looked after. If it's still good food that should be consumed, then I'd rather find a human being to feed first.
Mhm.
And then if I can't, then yes, it will go to be fed to the chickens kind of thing. So
Mhm.
it's, it is that line of like food security, right? Like food
Mhm.
security in our society. And it's like, if you can be a part of that, uh,
Mhm.
the gratification and the like just within inside of like
Mhm.
who we are and what we've done. And so, we've stretched into more like food security things where, providing food for single moms or, for at-risk families in the school system or like
Mhm.
those kinds of things. And so it
Mhm.
is, pay it forward. Strong community is a community that's well fed, a child that eats and every morning learns. If you don't eat, you don't learn, right? So
Yeah. The zero waste farming is beyond the preserving and like, how can I make it last throughout the winter or stretch it throughout like past multiple seasons? What I'm hearing is it's preserving for your family, for your friends, and bringing that to market or finding a place to sell it. And then it's also um, feeding it into our animals, rotating it through, um, or maybe giving it to your friends' animals who are looking for extra food, and feeding it into our communities, to food banks and schools. And
like when we're doing all of our juicing, like with our pulp and stuff like that, because you look at all the pulp that comes off of all the apples that we press or fruit that we press that goes into cider. So right now we have a woman that we sell all of our pulp to. So we sell all of our pulp to her from the cider, and then basically she takes it, she dries it, and then she sells it into all those companies that make those energy bars and energy, like those, like all those protein drinks and like all the protein powder. So basically it gets dried and then grind down into powder, and then it's used in all sorts of other things. And so it's right from the apple, from that whole apple being, the juice taken out of it, and I'll keep that and then sell the pulp. And then but at the same time, it's like, it is asking around, it's like making those connections. It's for storage crops, it's like, investing in the proper storage facilities so that you can store your squash. Like we'll have squash, like some years we'll have squash right until like June. And I'm like, people are like, oh, so this is fresh from the season. And I'm like, no, it's from like, we harvested it last September or October. But at the same time, if your facility is good and you keep and you invest in those kinds of things, and it's all small steps, and it's all like steps that you grow on. And to look at what we're doing here today is overwhelming. And start small and make those baby steps. And it's eventually you can get there. You can be a zero waste farm and be happy and content with it. And then, expand into other places where, being able to give back to your community on a bigger level, right? So with our marketplace and cafe, providing meals for, at-risk families or like those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. So if someone was starting out today, looking at different ways that they could practice zero waste farming, and they've never even thought about, they've just been composting everything that they've been bringing home for the markets or not selling, which is also very, very valuable. And for some people, that is their zero waste model. Where would you suggest to start?
I think like if you don't have, start by feeding your family for sure. Like start by like small steps and feeding your family. And if processing food isn't something that you're super passionate about, like go to like small scale food processors and reach out to like someone that's a small scale food processor. They might buy all your seconds onions, and they might buy your good onions as well, but you might have a market for your good onions and be able to grow onions for them, but they'll also take all your onions that are sprouting or they got a little sunburn on them, and you can sell them at a discounted price to them, and they're going to process it. And so starting off with getting a contact to like small scale food processors, and if it's putting stuff in jars or drying stuff is your passion, then like go that way and invest in, a dryer, even if it's small, just to start off with, and try it out. And maybe you'll just do it for your own family to start off with, and then maybe it'll expand into something bigger. But you don't have to do it all yourself. There's other resources out there for sure.
I love that. And what also came to mind is maybe seeing if there was another farmer or friend that really loves preserving food or doing some type of zero waste production, and teaming up with them and making it a fun thing rather than a work thing. Yeah. Is there anything else about zero waste farming that we haven't talked about that's really on your heart that you want to make sure that we touch on or share?
I think it feeds your soul in a lot of ways. Like this weekend we went to market and we launched a vegan pesto within our cafe, because we can do a little bit more preserving with having, now it's on the farm, we have like 3 kitchens. So we have our processing kitchen, which is our drying facility with a processing kitchen in there. And then we have our marketplace and cafe, which is a full certified kitchen. And then we also have our restaurant kitchen at row 14. And so row 14, encouraging them to do some processing and some stuff under the row 14 name, which gets sold under that name, but accesses stuff from our farm as well. And so we can let them know what we have and what I don't want to process or what I don't have time to process. And hopefully they jump on it. If not, then, we'll turn it around and we'll, process it in a different way. And then with the marketplace and cafe, I was saying that we can expand into other things because we have the retail space now. So we have an on-farm retail space with freezers. And so making pesto. So now like any basil that's harvested off our farm, it is used in like our pasta pizza sauce, like, so we can bring it to market. If it doesn't sell, we can bring it back home. We can freeze it. I use it in ciders. I use it in our pasta pizza sauce. We use it for like in our like stuff that we serve out of the restaurant, out of the cafe and stuff like that. We sell it to restaurants frozen. We also make a pesto. And so it's one of those things that has allowed us to expand a little bit bigger of a way and have a direct consumer that we can serve it to right up front and be like, make a small batch and, have people come into the cafe and be like, oh yeah, here, this is new, try it. We launched a beet burger a couple weeks ago. So all of the beets that get like a rodent trews on a bit of them, or they get split in the field, or, multiple, like they just don't look great. They're misshapen or whatever. And so now with that, we launched a beet burger at the marketplace and cafe. And, it was one of those things I'm like, well, if it goes over really well, eventually, we could freeze it, package it, and sell it frozen. And, the first person that had it was like, oh my God, you should sell these. And then I'm like, yeah. And it was like, and then this weekend I came back from market, and they're like, so 4 people came in and had the beet burger, and they were asking, so where do I buy this burger? So it's like one of those things where, having that avenue where, people are trying it. So don't invest a lot of time in making something if people don't like it. So, feed your friends, feed your family, and, go from there. Get the confidence in the product before, making something that you think is really good, but other people also have to think it's really good so that you can sell it.
That's right. That's a really good tip. And I just want to acknowledge you're joining us from your beautiful row 14 today. That's in the backdrop, the kitchen in the back that we can see with the big windows. And it's what you've done with the farm and your journey, Annamarie, is quite inspiring. And I love how you remind us that some people can start off really big, right? They have investors. And at the same time, that's not the way most of us start off. Most of us start off borrowing, renting, or purchasing our land. And that's where we start off. And so noticing what our first step is and how we can just be like, have some grace with ourselves, because each of us are on our own path, and each of us is in the right place at the right time. And so just honoring that space for everybody watching this, that Annamarie has been building what she's been building for 20 years,
yeah.
Right? 2 decades. It took her 2 decades to get here. And so let this be an inspiration of where you could go if you wanted to go to these places. And at the same time, just be really mindful and in a place of celebration where you are today, and just noticing what's on the horizon for what your next step is in practicing zero waste farming. Thank you, Annamarie. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Be sure to visit klippersorganics.com and check out all the ways that they're doing zero waste farming on their farm. And you can find them on Facebook and Instagram at Klippers Organics.
So I'm curious where you are on your journey with zero waste. Are you using everything on your farm, or is there a growth edge where you could be using more of what might be considered waste on your farm? Is there a place that you can donate some of your food to? Is there a way that you can preserve it? Is there a way that you can partner with another farm to preserve things or move into a finished product together? I'd love to know what you're thinking. I'd love to know how we can support you on your journey. Be sure to tag us with how you practice zero waste farming on your farm and what you're thinking of doing, so that we can share your stories and get the word out. You make yourself an amazing day. Thanks for joining us for the Soil Summit. Big love.